Good morning. Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good morning, Jenny. Good. How are you?
I am okay.
Oh, good.
Well, I mean, nothing has died this morning. We've not had a major emergency going on, so this is all a good thing. And this morning, did you notice this? That did you go out this morning?
Yeah.
It was beautiful. I mean, there was some breeze. It didn't feel like we were walking on the sun.
Well, that's good old farm life. There you go.
I kind of felt like this is going to date me really, really bad, but do you remember the Scorpions and their song Winds of Change?
Yeah. I mean,
I was humming that.
Kid. I was a little kid.
Thanks, Michael. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it was nice. I mean, I am looking forward to the possibility of just finally moving past the Indian summer or whatever it is that we've been having that's caused us to feel like we're walking on the sun and move more toward, dare I say it, pumpkin spice.
Hey, there we go. Hey, I want to take just a second, Jenny, and plug Rope and just to reiterate, you know, we are a volunteer organization, and Rope has been on the front line and literally they've been the tip of the spear for years and years and decades even. You know, and we need people's help. You know, anything, you know, we started our Patreon. We've got our rope2.org/donate page up where any little thing anybody can do, even $5 a month, just here, there, just everything helps us. You know, I think people forget just how important the work that you guys have done in the past, from Common Core to, I mean, think about Jenny. Rope was a year in advance of the whole library book issue in schools and the library.
Oh, more than a year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, more than a year. I think we started that in 2012.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, for this recent real hard push that, everybody,
Yeah.
I mean, with all the books that everybody read. So it's just, to me, I just want to reiterate, we're a volunteer organization. We're out here, working for families and parents and just our rights against government, in general, especially in education. So I just want to remind everybody, we do need your help in any way you can help us.
Well, and I appreciate you doing that. And we have a WordPress bill that's $300 that's due just here any day. So if anybody you can see on the rope2.org/donate. If you'll go there, we take PayPal, Venmo, Give, Send, Go, and you can send us a check, and our address is out there because we're completely transparent with everything we do. And you can actually send me a check, snail mail. So let's get on this morning and talk about our guest. Alex Newman is he's kind of like the Buckaroo Banzai of education. He does everything. He writes, he does podcasts, he's been in movies, he writes books. He is probably during the Common Core years, he was probably one of the singular people I looked to, because he really started coming into my perspective back in, 2010 or 11, somewhere in there, and was all on board with us against this tragedy that they called Common Core, that we now know has been horrible for children, and we have the stats to prove it, and more. So I just want to introduce him. I'm so excited he's on with us this morning, because this guy has more knowledge in his little finger than I have in my entire farm. So I'm so excited to talk to him this morning. So we're going to bring him on and say, good morning, Mr. Newman. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys? Thank you for having me.
Well, we're so happy that you are on with us this morning, because you are an amazing person, as I was just fawning all over you.
You guys are very kind. I appreciate it. Actually, I wrote that down, the Buckaroo Banzai. I've never been called a Buckaroo Banzai, so that's awesome. Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, I was looking at, because like I said, I've known about you for a long time. I mean, you were one of the primary voices against Common Core, and so I followed you a lot, and learned a great deal from you, and shared a lot of your stuff. But I had no idea. I mean, you studied languages.
Almost by accident. I left America when I was 4 and didn't come back until a few years ago. So I spent most of my life in 8 different countries on 4 continents, and either had to learn or not talk to people. So those are my options.
But that's awesome. I mean, yeah. Wow. And what a perspective you would get from living in those countries. And then, I've read numerous times about the fact that people who speak different languages use different parts of their brain, and you can actually consider them more intelligent than other people.
I don't know if that applies to me, but yeah, it's just one of those things.
Well, it's so good to have you on. And I wanted to talk to you just briefly to kind of start off this morning. Let's talk Common Core, since you were kind of at the forefront of that. Let's talk a little bit about that. So you had the same issues that we had with it, knowing the curriculum, all of the things. What do you think has been absolutely the worst thing about Common Core and the residual of it? Because, in Oklahoma, we repealed it from law in 2014, but teachers still use it, and it's still in testing. It's still in all kinds of places. So I just would like to know your thoughts about that.
That's a really hard question to answer, Jenny, because there's so many horrible elements of it. The one is that it really formalized the federalization of education. Now, we all know that was already there. It was already coming. There were already carrots and sticks in place. But Common Core is the moment when it somehow became tolerable, at least in some sectors. If you had said in the 1990s, we should have a national education system, we should have national education standards, people would have said, what? Why? Right? We have a local school board to worry about that. No, thank you. But then Common Core came along and a huge propaganda campaign. And it's like, well, what if a kid moves from one state to another state, right? So that kind of institutional mechanism to enforce a national program on every local school district, that I think was a big problem. The dumbing down was going on before Common Core. It kind of got more dramatic, more extreme under Common Core. The data gathering and the data mining, which were part of Common Core, might be a good candidate for that title, because that took a great leap forward. Chairman Mao, red phone, pick up in your office. But that took a huge advanced step forward when Common Core came in, because they started building these state longitudinal databases with federal money, all connected to the federal systems. I don't know. There's just so many bad elements of it. And a lot of people think it's a dead issue now because, like you said, it's not in the law in Oklahoma anymore. We had a lot of states just blatantly defraud voters and say, well, we don't have Common Core. We have Indiana state standards now, or, whatever. And it was like 98% copied and pasted from Common Core. And people were like, oh, okay, well, good. We did our job here. Let's go home. It's just so bad on so many levels, and it's still an issue. And unfortunately, even under the Trump administration, it wasn't removed. And so, it's just bad all around.
Well, it's interesting that you say that about data mining. So I think in 12 or 13, I don't remember, but we found that was one of the data mining was one of the 4 pillars of the Obama administration's takeover of education. And we put those 4 pillars up, constantly. One of the things that was left over from that was not just the data mining, but it was interesting. Did you see the Epoch Times recent big splash page? 2 antiquated federal laws prevent children from having privacy in their educational records. Did you see that?
No. Wow.
It was I think it was over the weekend. It may have been Monday. And I put in our rope group chat, we win again, because we had that stuff, and you did it too. I mean, all of us who knew what was going on had that published, but now Epoch Times is going, hey, FERPA and PPRA, these 2 federal, what do you call them? Are they laws? I mean, what? That are supposed to be designed to help kids and protect them from data gathering just are not working. And I just thought, way to go, 15 years too late. I mean,
just in the nick of time. Oh, wait, no.
Yeah. Right. So there's that. And then there's also the teacher leader effectiveness pillar that we had. And in Oklahoma, we still haven't been able to get the teacher testing part out, where they teach the test. They make sure that the teachers are right on par, and they have to, you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. Yep.
So have you found the same thing, that's still embedded in states too?
It has to be. I mean, that if states want to get federal money, they're required to follow these things. And that's a big part of it. And so far, I know Oklahoma, some of your lawmakers have threatened to possibly consider at some point doing a study that would maybe think about severing ties to the federal government. They've done the same thing in South Carolina. But, other than talking about it and introducing a few bills here and there, I think Tennessee introduced a bill as well. But, nobody's had the guts to do it. And yet from all that I've seen, it looks like states would actually save money by doing that, because they wouldn't have to do all that kind of dumb stuff with the federal money. So it's very sad.
It's so funny that you say that, because in 2010 or 11, we actually had a states' rights committee that did some kind of basic data mining on our own state and how we spent our federal funds. And they actually put together a report that said we're spending more money getting federal funds than we're actually getting in federal funds. And yet every year, like you said, they possibly consider, talking about it on Tuesday and asking their dogs if maybe that there is somebody, it's just silly, and they know that this doesn't work, and they continue to do it. And I think the only reason is control. I mean, am I out of the ballpark, do you think, here?
No, and I think what happens is the education establishment, think of it like a hornet's nest. It's filled with vicious, brutal, violent hornets. And all politicians know that if you cross the hornet's nest, you're going to have tons of hornets chasing you down. It'll be the teachers unions and the administrator unions and the foundation for such and such and the national unions. So you'll stir up this whole hornet's nest. And when you become the target, when you stand out there, it's very hard to compete. I mean, people need to understand this is $1 trillion a year beast. There's no other institution in the United States, with the possible exception of the military, that has that much power, that many people connected to it. In many smaller towns, it is like the center of the economic system, right? Everybody either works for it or does the contracting there, or fixes the sprinklers, or does the painting. And so when you come after, they say, well, you hate public schools, and everybody thinks, oh no, I'm going to lose my contract. So everybody's terrified to take it on. It's okay for me because I don't depend on the government or the government school system. But if you're a legislator and you have to run for re-election in 2 years, that's scary. So we need somebody with a real backbone to take the lead here. And unfortunately, politicians are not famous for having backbones.
We know, and I think that what you said is 100%. And I think we don't think about the fact that I live in a small town, and I was mayor here for a little bit. And I remember one of the things the school board, and this is an entrenched school board member, right? I mean, their family lived here. Their great grandparents came from, wherever and helped start the town or whatever. I got put in my place several times with people saying, well, you're just talking about the biggest economy in this whole town. I'm like, we're 2,700 people that have a giant, we have the Redbud energy plant here. We have a steam generation plant. That's the center of the town. That's where all the money comes from. The big giant sinkhole is the school.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and also I would like to say, Jenny, when I ran for school board, I met with a lot of teachers, a lot of fifth grade teachers and those testing year teachers. And the thing that I got over and over again was they were so bogged down with all these programs and all these different things that they had to do. They didn't even have time to really teach. And, they're kind of that attrition level employee where they have to do everything, but they don't get any results. And then we have these reading and math scores like we have across this country, and people are just so content with how things are. It's just unbelievable to me that these teachers just, they know that all these issues are happening, but they're the most suppressed in my opinion, when it comes down to it. I mean, they're so afraid of all the retribution from administration. And it was just heartbreaking for me.
Yeah, I'm seeing that too. The teachers really do have it hard. And unfortunately, the unions keep them in line by saying, oh, Republicans want to dismantle public education. They want to leave you out on the street without a job, and they want to cut your and it makes me think of, maybe it's a little bit of a silly example, but, back in the Soviet days, they had, the collective farms. And imagine saying to the workers on the collective farms, oh, Republicans want to leave you unemployed because they hate farming. It's like, no, we just want to do things a little bit different. We're still going to need farmers. You just won't be, slaves to this horrible machine, right? But it's hard to make people understand that, because that's the system that exists. That's where their money comes from. And they know the system doesn't work. They see that their kids can't read. But, I'm just one person. What am I going to do against this $1 trillion a year machine? I better just keep my head down, and that way I can pay my mortgage and feed my kids. So.
Well, one of the things, Michael did run for school board, and what did you lost by 8 votes, right, Michael?
5 votes.
Oh, man.
Well, I'm sorry, 5 votes.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I don't believe. I'm sorry. I just don't believe it. I think one of the problems that is so prevalent in counties, and I'm going to say in Oklahoma County where we live, the election board, I don't believe does the job that they need to do on absentee ballots, verifying absentee ballots. And Michael lost on absentee ballots. And several of the people that we put up in this big school system have lost on absentee ballots. And I think that's one thing that we don't think about in terms of this particular fight. We know that anybody who's awake knows that the educrats are lefties. And we'll talk about something on that topic here in just a second. But we also have the problem that so many of the institutions that we're dealing with right now have been infiltrated. To the point where, I definitely believe that it's possible that these ballots aren't getting counted and oops, so-and-so didn't get elected.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because there's a docuseries coming out very soon involving one of the major teachers unions. And I can't say too much more, but that sort of criminal behavior is not unusual. And we're dealing with some of the institutions that make up the $1 trillion a year beast are quite literally criminal organizations in the truest sense of the term. I mean, just gangster tactics, mafia tactics. And hey, if you got to, break a few eggs to make an omelet, you got to make the omelet. It's for the kids, right? Come on. You hate kids?
Well, I do. I have 5, but I hate them all.
Yeah, and that's the standard line. I mean, you criticize anything having to do with the system, and you just hate kids.
But and it's funny that you say that because I'm getting to the point, and I hope where we kind of all are, because people often say to me, well, I'm like you just said a second ago, I'm one person. I mean, what can I do? And that is a lot of the thought process. We know part of the thing that you can do is not believe the tropes and, speak out yourself. And one of the things that I do on my social media is they do this kind of stuff and I'll just go, yeah, I hate kids. So,
right. And then they're disarmed, right? They got nothing left. Uh-oh. Oh, she knows.
Now where do I go? Right. And I think that's what we've got to start doing is, playing their Wordle. I mean, today's word is you hate kids. Okay, I'll play. Yep. I hate kids. I mean,
that was Donald Trump's successful formula, right? Yeah. They would come at him with some attack and he would lean into it and they'd say, oh no, what do we do now? Right. And people went for it. People voted for him in huge numbers. I do think your average member of the public sees through this stuff. I don't think your average member of the public reads the local newspaper. Union boss accuses concerned mom of hating kids. I don't think your average reader says, oh, wow, they must really hate kids, right? But unfortunately, as long as we cower in fear of being called a bad name, they know that that's really effective, and that's why they do it.
But, it's interesting. Think about that. That's with everything. I mean, that's with the bullying online. That's with everything. We're so scared of being called homophobic or racist or this or that or the other thing. We're self-editing.
Yep.
And we need to quit self-editing and just go, you know what? I'm not a homophobe and you're not going to bully me. And that's the way it is. So, there's no way these weapons are weapons of fear, and there are no bullets for weapons of fear. There's no fire. You don't have a flamethrower that's a weapon of fear. I mean, it's just words. And once we figure this little thing out and go up, it's kind of like our parents used to say, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. The only difference between then and now is that these morons end up going to your employer and getting your employer to fire you. And that's the real problem. If it were just a game on the playground of, your mama wears, army boots, well, so does yours. I mean, if that's all it was, we'd be good to go. But these people literally will try to get you fired from your job. But then again, a lot of us, like me, hide behind a husband who has a job. So long as he stays employed, I'll just say what I like.
Yep. No, it's true. If you are independent and you can withstand those kinds of attacks, it makes it much easier. For me, they don't have an employer that they can go to and say, hey, fire him. And even if they did, most of my clients would stand beside me, I'm quite sure. So it makes it more difficult for them to come after me. But we do. I mean, you're exactly right. We do need to stop cowering in fear about this, and all the slurs, the label lynching that they use, and oh, you don't want critical race theory in schools? Well, you are just a white supremacist. So you don't want your kids seeing drag queens dancing around in the classroom? Well, you're a transphobe. It's like, no, that's not even a thing. Stop it, and we're not playing that. It's just ridiculous. Call me whatever you want, but no, I don't have any rational fear of guys in dresses. I just don't think they need to be in school dancing in front of my children. Thank you.
I love that. That's exactly right. But speaking on that topic, I want to share my screen with you so that you can kind of make a comment about something, because we had just talked about it. And I'm just going to pull up my Facebook page, because this is kind of where it is right here. So Jamie Cole, who is this, she literally is the person who runs kind of the Educrat gang. Let's call him a gang. She runs the Educrat gang here in Oklahoma. And we actually had, I don't know if you've seen it in, it's now made the public. I think Fox covered it. We have a drag queen who is a principal in one of our Oklahoma City public schools.
I did.
And you did.
Mm-hmm.
And he was outed. And so this was the response. This was the response. This is hard for some people to grasp, but educators are allowed to have a private life and do things that give them joy outside of school. I love to garden. I love to go places with my family. My husband is restoring his 78 Ford. Now, please tell me that is not the most hysterical thing you have literally ever heard in your whole life.
It really is amazing. And if somebody can't tell the difference between gardening, restoring a Ford, and prancing around half naked wearing the clothing of the opposite sex and making a caricature of the opposite sex, they probably don't belong in a school teaching children. I'm just saying, right? It's you would think that'd be a pretty obvious distinction. But
gardener, drag queen.
Right. Smoking crack, restoring a 78 Ford. It's practically the same thing.
We're laughing because, what else are you going to do? But this is the way these people think. And I guess we're laughing at it because, I'm at the point of making fun of it. These people are just funny. That's such an amount of nonsense that I don't know how you squeeze it into any other thought process other than that's just flat crazy. One of the things, and I'm curious to hear your take on this too. One of the things that I believe is I guess I'm going to say the worst, but right now it's like, how do you determine what is the worst? We seem to find a new worst every day. But I think one of the worst things that we're seeing is this push to make children adults. Because if children can become adults, then they can consent to anything. And once they've consented to something, their innocence is ruined. And once their innocence is ruined, then really their mind is blown and you can do whatever you want with them. You can tell them whatever you want. Again, people have, said that I wear a tinfoil hat. It's just my gray hair, but people have said I wear a tinfoil hat. Does that sound tinfoil hatty to you?
Not at all. And in fact, there was a lot of research done on this. I wrote extensively on this in the Epic Times. The perverts that were obsessed with pushing the sex education in the schools, they understood full well what they were doing. It had a socio-cultural political agenda far beyond just, if you want to use that word, encouraging promiscuity among children. We know the effects of this. The federal government knows the effects of this. I've got a few books in my office here. I wonder if they're within grabbing distance. Dr. Anshel Melville. Where is it? But what this does, once they get these kids sexually active, it causes lifelong transformations in their mind that are going to affect them for the rest of their lives. It's going to affect their marriage. It's going to affect their child rearing. It's going to affect their family. It's going to affect every element of their life. And it's harmful in a massive way. But what they figured out, this was 100 years ago, they started with this in, for example, communist Hungary under Georgy Lukács. This was the brief Bolshevik period. They figured out that if you could get kids exposed to sexualized material, you were more effective in breaking down the old social mores, the old Christian culture, the old system of morality. And ultimately, the end objective is not just encouraging promiscuity for its own sake. It's the breakdown of the nuclear family. They figure if they can get these kids fornicating, if they can get these kids consenting to all sorts of perversion, then there's a much lower risk that they're going to get married and settle down and have children and pass on their family values, their Christian culture, their heritage to their children. And that there opens up the way for the Marxists to come in and, as they see it, write on the blank slate of these children's minds and turn them into the new Soviet man, as the Soviets used to say. So there's a very sinister purpose behind this beyond just the perversion and the sexualization of children that people need to understand. And I don't think your average, school health teacher that's teaching this nonsense understands this. They've been trained in their college of education that this is what you do, that this is good for the kids. And they give them all the talk about, well, you don't want them to have lots of extra abortions, do you? And you don't want the spread of STD. You have to teach them safe sex. And so you have to teach 4-year-olds about, things that we can't even mention here. And so people justify this to themselves. And there are great, you probably know some of them who've come out of this system. In fact, I think I was in Oklahoma when I met my first sex ed teacher, and she started crying after one of my talks. What's wrong? I was doing this for all these years, and now I see what I've done. It's just heartbreaking. Monica Klein is just a wonderful lady. She was in that. She was trained to do this stuff to children. And now, praise the Lord, she's out there exposing this filth. She's out there sharing her testimony. And there really is a dastardly, terrible, evil agenda here behind the sexualization of children.
How do you, and I know this may be a really tough question to answer. How do you break through to parents? Because as well as I do, because you've seen it over and over again. It's always the NIMBY thing, not in my backyard. No, my school is great. My teacher is perfect. Oh, and they love everything about it. But really all they're getting, is it's the script. Hi, honey, how was your day? Oh, it was fine. Okay, see you later. Well, how do you know? I mean, when that's all the time that you get with your kids, how do you know? The only way I ever knew is because I was in my kid's backpack. And this was in elementary school when I was finding all of this stuff and going, oh, no, you're not doing something about global warming. Oh, no, we're not horrible because the Native Americans had, are now on reservations. It's not just white people, you have to stop and address all of these things all the time. And parents, by and large, just aren't. So how do you make them understand what's going on?
It's a very good question, Jenny, and I wish there was a simple answer. There really is.
I was expecting you to have one.
Right. And the problem is compounded because we're now several generations into the brainwashing. And so your average parent, maybe the education education in air quotes wasn't quite as extreme, but they still have a worldview that's been instilled on them that's along the same lines. It may be a little more radical. We didn't have drag queens in school when I was a kid, but I guess this is what the experts say. So they've already instilled this mindset in a big chunk of parents. So that makes the problem even more difficult. You have to then show them not just that what their kids are learning is bad for their kids and false, but that what they believe and what they learned is false. And that makes it very, very difficult. Nobody wants to admit to themselves, oh, well, maybe I was lied to. Maybe I was foolish for believing that stuff. Maybe the consequences of believing that stuff are going to be devastating to my family, my country, my community, my church. Nobody wants to believe that. So it's a very, very difficult process. But I think in my experience, when you can show that the agenda was there from the beginning, right? And that's why when I get invited to speak on education, people tell me, well, you have 30 minutes. Like, no, 30 minutes is not enough, right? I have to show where this agenda came from. I have to prove that the perverts and evildoers who set up the system had these sinister goals. I have to show that this stuff leads to terrible consequences, like what we've seen in other countries that have gone through Marxist revolutions and things. So you have to show the big picture, and you can't do that in a soundbite. And yet we live in a soundbite culture where everybody expects your digestible talking points in 15 seconds before we go to break. And here, brought to you by Pfizer. And it makes it very, very difficult. And I think really what it's going to take is parents realizing the devastation this is wreaking on their children. And more parents are realizing that, right? Kids are coming home. They think they're a new gender. They're starving themselves. They're taking drugs. They're having abortion, whatever. So it's going to take parents realizing that their kids are hurting to start saying, well, what happened here? That's when they go looking for answers that then we can stand ready to provide the answers that they're looking for.
Well, so I guess just jump right in, Michael, if I'm talking over you, but I keep getting.
No, you're not. But I do want to make a comment there to what Alex just said. I've got 5 kids from 18 down to 9 years old. And I just see that constant propaganda. I mean, if I'm not the one constantly refuting everything, and hopefully I'm doing a good job, but Alex, like for example, last night, my 12-year-old is at karate class. And he's in a heated argument with 3 other kids in the class because these 3 kids are like, we're bad. We're causing climate change. We need to, this is my son's 12-year-old karate class. And he's the only one, and all these kids are like, haven't you seen this? The ice caps are melting. And they're just hammering my son. I didn't even chime in. I just let him go. Luckily, he did a pretty good job. But you just see that constant propaganda, and it's almost like it's endorsed by the government, and it probably is in some capacity, but I don't know how we actually, other than parents just suffering at the hands of this, how we actually break that cycle. And just one other comment, my 9-year-old in school, he just got this was going back to kind of a previous topic, but I just wanted to throw this in there real quick. So I want to see what you thought about it. He just got we got an email that they're going to do suicide prevention, from pre-K through 5th grade, through 4th grade in his elementary school. And I was just completely blown away that would even be a consideration.
Yep. Oh man, there's so much to say right there. The suicide prevention. We actually have a chapter on that in our book, Crimes of the Educators, published about 10 years ago now. It's unthinkable. I mean, if you tell somebody from the 70s or 80s, if you had told them back then that soon kids would be killing themselves in massive numbers as a result of what they're learning in school, they never would have believed you. And yet here we are. And the politicians say, oh, we need more gun control, right? 100 years ago, a kid could order a fully automatic machine gun out of the Sears catalog, no questions asked, no ID. They didn't used to kill themselves. They didn't used to kill each other. Obviously, something different's going on here. But these so-called suicide educations, death education, these actually cause children to think more about death. And we argue in the book actually lead to children killing themselves and children killing other children. And it's partly because of the worldview that's being instilled in them. They're being brought up with a godless worldview. Correct. There is no purpose to life. Your main objective then is just to be happy, to seek pleasure. And if you're not feeling pleasure, well, then there's no reason. We'll have a suicide education and tell you not to kill yourself. Because, it's just like the anti-drug things, right? Kids, drugs are really interesting, and people really like them, but don't do them because they're bad. Oh, okay, right. And so the kid's going to go out and smoke pot. And to the first thing you said about worse. Right, exactly. And to the first thing that you said about what's happening with these kids, what's going on here in the schools, and parents really struggle with this. This is behavioral conditioning. And that's why your son debating against 3 other kids, you could debate till you're blue in the face. You could have every fact, every figure. You could have the NASA studies proving that the narrative is wrong. And it's very easy to do this. I've been following the climate clown car around the world for 15 years now. I've been going to all these UN climate summits. I've interviewed all their climate scientists, at least all the ones that would speak to me. It's very easy to demonstrate that this is pseudoscientific fraud. But you can't show that to somebody who hasn't been reasoned into his or her position. They've been conditioned, very much like Pavlov used to condition his dogs. It's just more sophisticated. So they're conditioning these children to have certain emotional responses to stimuli. And so the topic of climate change comes up, or driving cars, or eating steak. And they're not thinking, oh, well, according to this fact and this fact, that's going to produce a problem. they're conditioned like a circus animal to start not salivating, but oh, climate change, we're bad for the planet, blah, blah, blah. And so you can't present facts, evidence, and reason to get them out of that position because they weren't convinced into that position through facts, reason, and evidence. So we have a major, major problem here. And I wish I knew how to deal with it. I don't, other than, protect the kids from it in the first place and try to inoculate them in the best sense from this kind of manipulation. And I think that's what parents have to do.
I have to say that was amazing. And I think I'm just going to clip that and then spread it all over everywhere, because even I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. Not that I'm the, biggest thinker. That's not what I mean. But I'm just saying I do think about this a lot. And that's not something that I had thought about. You cannot convince a conditioned person of anything. You have to counter condition them.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is literally what's going on here, Jenny. If you look at the computer program, they're sitting these kids down in front of their iPad, and they say, here's global warming. What do we do about global warming? And if they get the right answer, if they have the right attitude, little smiley faces pop up on the screen and happy music and confetti. And, the kid gets a little dose of endorphins, dopamine. Ooh, that was good. I had the right attitude. Just like when they do, what B.F. Skinner was doing with the rat, right, the punishment reward. Then you get the wrong answer. Well, I think maybe marriage is between a man and a woman. Dun, dun, dun. You get the sad music and the sad face. It's very, very dangerous. It's incredibly manipulative. And parents aren't even seeing it because it's on a little device. It's not like in a school book that they're bringing home to show mom and dad. And you have U.S. Department of Education reports where they talk about these kinds of tactics, the feedback mechanisms that they're using to determine whether children are displaying the right attitudes or not. Orwell couldn't have imagined this stuff in his wildest dreams because the technology wasn't advanced enough. And yet all these UN documents tell you in plain English, we're changing the attitudes, the values, the beliefs, the mindsets of these children. How do you do that? It's through behavioral conditioning.
Honestly, that made your whole appearance here so awesome to me, because that put together something for me that I just had, because I've always been a reason person. Anybody will see reason. I can reason with you. Now I don't do that with leftists. I just make fun of them anymore. But because that doesn't work there. But I've always thought, well, people, you can reason with them, but that explains so much. And I knew that we were conditioning kids, and I could kind of see how we were doing it, but I guess I never even thought. So we've got to come up with some kind of counter conditioning, and we'll have to really think about what that is. But I want to jump into another thing really fast because we're already at 42 minutes. So we just in Oklahoma, and you're going to be so proud of us. We just made an historic investment in public education in Oklahoma, Alex. Millions and millions of dollars, like $720 million. And in public, I mean, I know it's exciting, isn't it? I mean, because we know that the government makes investments, right, with our tax dollars. So that's number one, how exciting that is, that we're going to get some return back for our investment. I'm so looking forward to that. But the other thing that I wanted to point out here is, though we tried to stop it and we got it stopped last year, or year before last, we just couldn't get it done this year. We now are going to be giving $7,500 per child tax credit to go to a private school of their choice, because these private schools aren't woke and they're way better than the public schools and blah, blah, blah. So now we have school choice in Oklahoma, universal school choice, as they like to talk about. And Corey, what is his name?
D'Angelo.
Corey DeAngelis. That used to work for the UN and then scrubbed that from their site. So he's no longer shown as being with the UN. So how awesome is Oklahoma for, and just tell it like it is, for us having this huge investment in public education, and then, making sure that we tax credit $7,500 per child to go to a private school.
Yeah, that's a really tough one. I try to say this as gently and kindly as possible because I
Just
know there's
don't.
right. Well, I mean, I know there's a lot of really, really decent people who ultimately want the same thing as me. They want kids rescued from this fake education, this indoctrination masquerading as education. But what I try to warn people is that this is not the way to do it. There's different ways that we could do it. And even though I share the objective that a lot of these people have, I think the means is incredibly dangerous, and it's going to end up in the most incredible own goal our side has ever seen. And I say that because I've been to the future. I've seen it. I know how this ends. I've seen it over and over and over again. In fact, school choice, it almost inevitably leads to school choice as is defined by the advocates of government funding for private schools and homeschools, ends up almost inevitably in the eradication of all genuine choice. And that's because what the government funds, the government will control. It's not like a might control at some indeterminate point in the future. It will. It's inevitable. It's like night follows day. When the government is funding something, the government's going to want to control that thing. And I mean, the courts have ruled consistently the government has not just the authority to regulate what it funds, but actually the duty. Those are public dollars. You can't just be throwing those around. I mean, what if someone's teaching their kids to be Nazis, as they argued in Utah moments after the school choice bill was signed? Well, we have to regulate homeschoolers. They're taking public money, and some parent might teach their kid to do a Heil Hitler salute. So this is going to result in radically more control over private schools and homeschooling until the distinctions between them are gradually eliminated. Unfortunately, my state followed suit recently as well. We did work with the governor and some of the legislators to mitigate the bad impact, but unfortunately, we did carve out an exclusion, so they created a new program. So now if you're homeschooling, you're still doing it yourself. We created a new program now called a personalized education plan, where you can fake homeschool with government money and government tests and government, what do they call them? Choice navigators and all the rest of it. But so this is really, really dangerous. Watched it happen in Sweden. They used the same arguments that they use here. They said, we'll introduce competition into the system, and then schools will have to compete for the dollars because the money will follow the child. We'll fund students, not systems. And then it was just the cheese in the mousetrap, right? All the private schools, ooh, free money. And then as soon as they took the free money, boom, the trap closes, and the government said, all righty, now that you're all taking the government money, every one of you is going to teach the government curriculum, which, by the way, makes California's curriculum look quite sane by comparison. No more Bibles, no more prayer in your Christian school. Okay, can't have that. So it completely eliminated schools, and then they just banned homeschooling because the homeschooling community wasn't strong enough to put up serious resistance. So I've seen how this goes. In fact, the UNESCO, the UN's education agency, has been advocating that governments go out and start handing out tax dollars to private schools. And they say in very plain terminology, the purpose of this is to bring them into the national accountability system, to force equity goals on them, to bring them into the testing programs. And of course, we all know that testing drives the curriculum. Testing drives what's taught. So, here, you can have free government money. You just have to take the test to make sure your kids are learning something. And, to be able to pass that test, you now have to teach exactly what we want taught. So this is very dangerous. I know a lot of the legislators in your state who are involved with this. I think highly of them. I begged certain key people in Oklahoma not to do this. Friends, people who I've known for years, who were in a position to do something. And unfortunately, my warnings fell on deaf ears. So I wish you guys well.
Here's the reason why. And Alex, I don't think you understand. It's a tax credit. Nothing bad can happen with a tax credit. So I just think maybe you don't understand what a tax credit is.
Well, and you have to start. You have to start somewhere, Jenny. That was one of the biggest things. Everyone that I talked to was, it may not be the best, but you at least have to start somewhere to get out of public school.
Because government shrinks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And, it's a tough issue because, I understand where people are coming from, right? I literally pay, and I say this a lot, I literally pay more money to brainwash other people's kids than I spend to give my own 5 children a world-class education that is light years beyond whatever nonsense they're doing in the government schools. That's not fair. That's fundamentally unfair that I have to pay thousands of dollars from my meager income. My wife doesn't work outside the home. We don't have a lot of money laying around to spare, and they want to extort us to pay for brainwashing other people's kids with LGBT. It's grotesque. It's ridiculous. And so I understand the people want to say, no, let me keep more of my own money. I think there are ways that may be acceptable, like here in Florida, and I don't know the situation in Oklahoma, but I work with some lawmakers in other states to try to come up with it. But you keep running into the same problems. But so I'll give kind of one vision that I think might work, and then some of the pitfalls for that. Here in Florida, when we pay our property taxes, and it may be different in Oklahoma, but we get a little thing in the mail from our county tax collector. It's a form, and it says, if you have a home, everybody gets a homestead exemption if you live in your primary home. If you get that, you get a nice discount on your property taxes. Are you the widow of a veteran, or are you a veteran? Okay, check. You get another little discount. Do you? Are you the wife of, or are you a law enforcement or whatever? Check. So you get little different deductions from your property tax. If
that's correct.
Criteria.
Here too.
And so what I said to our governor and to some of the folks in our legislature, as long as we're going to be doing the little boxes, why not just have a box on there that says I'm the parent of a school-age child and I choose not to use my local government public school. Sorry. And then whatever money from my tax bill would have gone to the public schools, I just get to keep myself. No strings attached. It doesn't go to Tallahassee and then come back to me. It's not refundable. So, you didn't have to pay a lot of tax, so we're going to send you a $10,000 check. I think there may be some validity to that. But the courts have ruled on this too. And I've talked to a lot of attorneys about it, and they say, well, that's fundamentally different from the government giving you money, or even the refundable tax credits is still the government giving you money, right? It's like,
well, and let me,
we're going to give you a check. Go ahead, Jenny.
And let me stop right there so that you can kind of tease that out a little bit, because that's what I was making fun of a minute ago. People don't understand. They think that a $7,500 tax credit per child is somehow a tax credit. I mean, I haven't figured out exactly how many millions of dollars in income in Oklahoma you would have to pay to get that multiple $7,500 deduction on your property taxes here, or how big your home would have to be. But I think that's where people are getting confused, Alex, is that what is a tax credit versus a refundable tax credit?
Yep. So a tax credit is where they just never take your money in the first place. A refundable tax credit, and the federal government does this all the time. They give you a refundable tax credit where you're not actually paying any money, and they're just sending you a check. It's like, what are you refunding me? I didn't give you any money, right? And so that's
called a voucher.
Right. It's wealth redistribution, and that's going to come with strings attached, because that is money that's coming from the government that was taxed from other people that's going to you. And that is poison. I mean, I think we need to stand against that, because that is going to inevitably lead to control. If we're talking about tax deductions, like how you don't pay taxes on the money that you tithe to your church, that's another thing. If the government's not going to come in and tell my church what to teach on Sunday as far as doctrine goes. But even there, there are risks, and we've seen it with the 501c3s. You got all these pastors that don't want to say anything about like what the Bible says on government, because, the IRS might get mad and I might lose my 501c3. So there's always a big risk here. And I think really the end objective really should be, we need a separation of education and state.
Yes.
Why do we want the government to control education? Historically in America, education was in the sphere of the family and to some extent the church. Bringing the government in, even just the camel's nose under the tent, was a really, really bad idea. And the last 100 years should probably prove that to people, if nothing else does.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, completely. So just to bounce off of that a little bit more, we have two large private schools in the Oklahoma City area, and there's one large private school in Tulsa. And the thing that kind of really gets my nose out of joint even further beyond all of the other stuff that we just talked about is the fact that these private schools are more woke than some of the other schools are. I mean, one of the private schools that I know of in the Oklahoma City area, that's one of the two larger ones, literally celebrated a girl coming out in their elementary school and had a party for the family who was going to provide her a sex change operation in elementary school. So why is it that we're okay and somehow, our governor says, oh, well, we just don't want the kids in these, indoctrinating public schools. And not all schools, not all private schools are like that. But come on, why are we suddenly holding up as some bastion of, perfection, private schools? I think, granted, there are parents who are terrible parents who should never have children, have never been, how do you explain that? I don't know, but it happens. And know that one piece being completely removed from the equation, 100% of the time, kids are better off in their own households. So why we want to elevate someplace outside of the family for the child to be educated and then have government jump into that fray, to me, that immediately says, bing, 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 government takeover, bing, bing, bing. Because if the government really wanted to protect your liberty, they would do everything they could to keep that child in your home.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. And I've been saying that for years that I really do believe homeschooling is the gold standard for those who can do it. And you're absolutely right about private schools. Some of the most expensive private schools in this country are some of the wokest institutions in this country. We see it in New York. We see it in LA. We see it in San Francisco. And Elon Musk's daughter, right? Elon Musk now been saying that the fancy, I think it was $50,000 a year private school was actually a Marxist institution that brainwashed. I think his daughter now won't even talk to him. She's transitioning to a new gender. I mean, that's the kind of stuff a lot of parents are finding out after spending $50,000 a year on these rat holes. Very, very troubling. And I think it's partly about, who should be overseeing the education. And the assumption in our modern society is that you need to leave that to professionals, that parents are not qualified to educate their children. And I think we need to reverse that erroneous perception of education. You don't need to be an expert. You certainly don't need a PhD in education to be able to teach your own children. And I think as we move more and more away from the government mechanisms and toward private mechanisms, I think what'll happen with a lot of these woke schools is they'll start losing students. I don't think there's a lot. There are some, but I don't think there's a lot of parents that want to spend a lot of money to have their kids brainwashed into not knowing what bathroom to go into, or thinking that they're racist and that they need to perpetually repent of their white privilege. I just don't think there's a lot of parents, even Democrat parents, that want that. But the model that we had in early America, from say the early settlements all the way up until about the mid 1800s, where it was just assumed that education, at least early education, was primarily going to take place in the home with mom, with dad, with older siblings, with grandma, grandpa, aunts and uncles. And then, from there, if the child determines that he or she needs some additional education, they can go on and maybe enroll in a college or a private academy, get a tutor if they really need expertise in some area. That worked really well. And all you got to do is look back at that era. Just go read the letters that people used to write to each other. Read the textbooks of that era. What you'll find is that these people were far more intelligent, far more knowledgeable than even highly educated Americans today. So what we were doing back then worked. What we're doing today doesn't. And really the big difference was education back then was family centric. Education today is government centric. And I think we need to move back in that direction.
Couldn't agree with you more. And just when you were talking that second ago, Michael and I were talking about this the other day. You always see the man on the street interviews with people, where they do them with college students or, high school students, and they ask them some questions. And it was one of the last ones, I think Prayer You did it. And it was so fascinating to me because they did such a great job. So they were asking them basic questions. Who's the vice president? They didn't, of course, they didn't have any idea. They didn't know where the nation's capital was located. Just basic questions like that. But then the interviewer says, I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny. Can you name all the Kardashian sisters? How many couldn't?
Oh man!
And they even threw in as a bonus the brother. Yeah. Who can name the brother? How many of the people answered that one? every single one of them, that they had no idea that Washington, D.C. held the seat of our government.
I've seen videos where they ask people who was the nation's capital named after. Oh, I don't know. Then they came to an Italian tourist, and the Italian tourist was like, "Oh, George Washington, of course." What kind of stupid question is that, right? Oh, God help us, we're in so much trouble.
Why are we laughing? This is not funny.
It's so not funny. It's like our country standing at the edge of the cliff, just about to fall over the edge. God help us, for real.
I know. I mean, I guess part of the reason why you laugh is it's just simply absurd. I mean, we've gotten to the point where, I mean, I brought this to the forefront before, but I just don't see how it doesn't apply. I think everybody, haven't you seen the movie Idiocracy?
I have. Yep.
I mean, honestly, I don't know how you can't watch. Mike Judge was probably, he directed the movie, did Beavis and Butthead, and the one in Texas.
King of the Hill.
King of the Hill, yeah. And he did this movie, and I don't know how you can't watch that movie at this point and just feel like he wasn't Prophet Mike Judge, because we're really getting to the point where, you know, I don't know. We've got to do something to change it around, but what we're doing isn't doing it. So
well, I think Alex kind of made the point earlier. You know, we need to use, you know, some of these tools that we have with our intellect and everything, to where I think in order to make some changes, we need to make fun of these ideas and these issues and point out, you know, these things. And almost, you know, in my opinion, we need to troll these people 10 times, because that just has an effect. Someone might have a light bulb go off, say, "Oh my God, I can't believe that," because it was so moronic. And that's kind of what those interviews on the street do. I mean, it actually does, I think, wake some people up, but we need to go on overdrive, because I don't know if we have the time to do the reconditioning, you know, out of where these people are right now. It's mind blowing.
Yep. Hey guys, I hate to be a party pooper, but I have another engagement that starts right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, Alex. I really appreciate it. And God bless, and safe journeys.
Thank you so much, guys. God bless you. Talk to you soon. Take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye. That was a great interview.
Yeah, he was right on. He's good.
He's just been so, you know, so staunch over the years. But I have to say, I mean, I remember when we had the interview with Sam Sorbo, and Sam, so for those of you who are watching, you've heard me say this 4 times. I'm really sorry. Oh, and by the way, I had the cutest thing happen to me yesterday. I was shopping at Sprouts, and I had my hat on because I just looked really horrendous. And this sweet girl goes, "Are you Jenny?" And I said, "Yes." Her name was Alicia, and she watches our podcast, and she just wanted to say what a great job she thought we were doing with the podcast. So Alicia, God love you, and thank you for stopping me the other day, and thank you for watching. But I just think when Sam was on and she talked about the fact that we do these pro and con lists, you know, well, what are the pros and cons of me homeschooling my kid versus putting the kid in a public school? Okay, well, why not a priority list instead of a pro and con list? And if you do a priority list, if your kid isn't at the top of that priority list, then why did you have kids in the first place?
Yeah.
So then I think, you know, we need to change our perspective. And when he said, I mean, that really was a big change of perspective for me. And what Alex just said about the conditioning, you know, I've never, like all good children, I took psychology. But isn't it funny how they teach you in psychology all of these things, but they don't teach you how that ends up becoming a detriment to society, some of these, you know, psychological tools. And it's clear that our nemesis are using these psychological tools on us. And one of those definitely is conditioning. And he's exactly right. So parents, you know, when I was shopping yesterday, I went past 2 separate families, although I would say there were a bunch of families shopping yesterday, and 3 of 5, I actually counted 3 of 5 of them did not have their kids on a screen. They were walking around and talking to them about different things. And then 2 families I saw were amusing their kids with the screen while they were trying to get their shopping done. Well, I heard this one screen, it's, oh, great job. Oh, like Alex was talking about. And that is conditioning. And parents, you must get your children, if you're going to put them on some kind of electronic media gadget, make sure that you have vetted that program 100%, number one. And number two, if it's attached to the internet at all, you better have all kinds of protocols on that to keep disgusting content from coming in. And if you're going to look at me and say, but my kid's only 5, I'm just going out to Disney to get him something, blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't think you heard what Alex just said. I mean, the purpose and the plan is to get them as young as possible and condition them in ways that they're unconditionable. So let's wake up.
Well, and let me reiterate on top of that. I had a computer degree in college, and I've always kind of been involved in technology. I mainly do finance now, but you go back to the early days of Facebook and in the early days of social media, these guys, and you can see you can go back and watch all the interviews. They had the manipulation and the conditioning down to a science. I mean, the colors, the size of the check marks, every little thing that is on that screen is on there for a very specific reason, because it causes, some type of, physiological or chemical or some type of attachment or, emotional condition to happen in your body. And then you just become, you become programmable. And so for me, my kids, other than my 2 oldest that are 18 and 17, my kids don't have phones. They haven't. They're like some of the only kids that don't. We don't have cable TV. And
how dare you, Michael? Yeah. How dare you not give your kid a phone?
Well, and they get mad. I'm like, hey, you need to call me. Use your buddy's phone. All your buddies have phones, so if you need to text me. But I'll tell you, Sprouts is still on my boycott list, Jenny.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I will never step foot in Sprouts. I got kicked out of Sprouts for not wearing a mask, and I walked in there. This is the height of COVID, because I never wore a mask ever. And I was in there, I was getting some real salt. And this kid on this aisle, this woke kid, he comes up to me. He's like, hey, you can't be in here without a mask on. I said, yes, I can. He's like, that's against our policy. He's going all crazy on me. And I go,
yes, I can.
Yeah. So I go, it's all right. So anyway, I get my salt and I'm standing in line. Well, here comes the manager. The manager, everyone's just staring at me because I'm standing in line. I'm too close. I'm not 6 feet apart. I'm not standing on the little dot that they
Michael,
have.
not you.
On. Yeah. So anyway, I'm standing there. The manager comes over, and first he's like, we need to move over here. So I was nice enough. I moved over. So anyway, he goes, we can't check you out. I go, really? I said, why is that? He goes, well, you don't have a mask on. He goes, I have a mask right here if you want to put this on. I said, so let me get this straight. I said, you're only going to check me out if I put the mask on, correct? He goes, yeah. He goes, or if you want to, he goes, you could go stand outside and I could just ring your transaction up and bring it to you. I go, no. I said, that's not happening. So anyway, this is the
like
best
the
part
leper
here.
you are, go stand outside.
Anyway, this is the best part. So that salt was like $8 a pound, whatever it was. So I just pull out my wallet. I have cash. They can't not check me out because I have cash. So anyway, I just give the guy $10 and walk out.
There you have it.
So anyway, this is still on my boycott. There's a ton of people on my boycott list, but I'm not going to be pushed around with all that BS. But it's all conditioning. And to go back to Alex's point on the conditioning, I need to. We maybe should do a show on this, but you go back to the second term of Obama's presidency, and he either put in an executive order or there was some type of action to where he made it. It's always been illegal for the government to actually do propaganda against the people of this country. Well, they reversed that. He actually, through executive order, whatever it was, they reversed that action to now where it is legal. So, I mean, there's so many things that people just have no idea, but as long as they've got that phone or that device or social media or TV or, all their entertainment, which is just constantly, it's the same thing. It's like my son, where the kid's talking to him about global warming and the ice caps are melting. He's wanting my son to talk about the ice caps. So anyway, it's
but I do want to
drumbeat.
Yeah. But I do want to point this out though, about that. Not every child is Michael's. And if you're a Christian thinking that you send your child to school to, be salt and light and lead others, to Jesus and that kind of thing, 9 times out of 10, that's not happening. And what ends up happening is, children are children. That's why they have adults. That's why we don't call them adults. Children are children. They have, they're not able to stand for their beliefs in front of their peers who are more important to them than their parents for many, many, many years of their lives. So, that notion needs to be scrubbed immediately. You're not going to send your child to school as an emissary for Jesus and have that work out in your favor nine times out of 10, because 9 times out of 10, the school is working way harder than you are at trying to make that happen. So, if you really want your child to be an emissary for Jesus, do it at a homeschool co-op.
Yeah. Well, Denise Roberts, I think, is who you had on. She was talking about that socialization side,
right.
And how important that is, to the development of the brains in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the whole point of the matter is that, socialism. I think that was a Freudian slip if we've ever heard one. Socialization of children, it happens in the family. It happens at the family level. I'm sure we've all met some awkward homeschoolers, but that isn't the majority of homeschoolers out there. And if you have an intact family, or even if you don't have an intact family, you're a single mom, but you talk to your kids and, you guys have instead of watching television at dinner, you have a discussion about, things that are important at dinner. When my kids were in middle school, we took, and the only reason I say this is not because I'm the world's greatest parent, people. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But every once in a while, people will say, well, what did you do? So here's one of the things that I did. So in middle school, and my kids weren't allowed to have phones in middle school. What we did was there was a little book called George Washington's, something of ethics, and it was a little ethics book. And so we would sit down in the evenings at dinner and we would read a little Bible verse, but then we would read these ethics problems, and they were really super interesting. They went all the way back, I think, to like the late the turn of the 18th century. And, so you learn something a little bit about history, but then you also got, you had the opportunity to talk to your kids about ethics. What do you do in this situation? And I'll tell you, we had some very interesting discussions over that topic, but that's, most of you who know me know that I'm not a sports person. I don't care for sports. I participated in them when I was in high school, and I'm an athletic person, but they do not belong in school. They don't. That's a separate activity. And the fact that you're allowing your property to be indebted so that you can say you have the world's biggest football stadium is really stupid. And I'm sorry for calling you stupid, but I can't fix that. I mean, that's not what's important. What's important is your child learning to think and reason on your own, on his or her own, and to be able to see through propaganda be able to understand programming when they see it so that they don't end up getting programmed like Alex was talking about. So there are 100 things that are more important than sports. And that old ideal of, yeah, but sports teaches team spirit. Well, team spirit is socializing. I mean, it's, you're coming under a group to do one thing under one person with one goal, which is socialism. So, I mean, and I know everybody's going to go, oh, that's just crazy. And I love it when you talk crazy because, okay, fine.
Well,
I get it.
But you go. I mean, I'm right there. I mean, Jenny, I used to be a huge sports guy. I mean, I played golf in college, and
oh yeah, you were a big golfer, bud.
Yeah. I played all sports in high school and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, there is a point of competition that I appreciate about sports. But as far as when you look deeper into it, I mean, it goes back to the Romans, giving bread and circus, that's what sports are entertainment ultimately, but at another level, just like education, this is exactly how I think about education. I tell my kids this all the time. Education doesn't teach you to be an entrepreneur. It doesn't teach you. Our modern day school system is about creating an automaton. It's about someone that will use their, all they do is teach you how to memorize stuff so you can go work and be an employee for someone else. And that's the exact same thing with the team. Yeah, there's camaraderie, but team is about you taking orders from somebody else. That's what team is. I mean, that's like same thing with the military. You cannot question the orders of your higher ranking officers. I mean, it's all the same type of umbrella to where you have a small amount of people that are in control of the masses, and whatever application, whether you want to go from school to social media to employment, that is all encompassing. It's the same thing. It's keeping you at a certain level to where you can just get by. You have enough skills to just be a very small little cog in the wheel of the system.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing sports, frankly, but not with education. It should never be married to education. And if you want to go play soccer on your own time, that's fine. But, again, and to indebt a community for a football stadium so that you can say that you're number one in football. I mean, when I was a teacher, it used to absolutely piss me off. I hate to say that. I'm sorry if I offended anybody. I'm sorry. Anyway, used to make me so agitated that what would end up happening was I actually went into the basketball coach's room a couple of times. He was supposed to be teaching history. He would have his feet up on the desk, either reading the newspaper or doing something else while the kids did a worksheet, which is not teaching. And I think the way that we have manipulated sports in public schools today I think it's demeaning to the public. I mean, I really do. It's demeaning to property owners. And I don't believe that it helps. It certainly doesn't help the kids educate themselves. And the whole, what you said a minute ago about, the Romans and bread and circuses. Most people don't know what that is. So I will just say this. During the Roman times, toward the end of that particular nation, because don't forget, the Romans were overtaken by, what was his name? Who rode the elephants over the... This is what happens when you don't study all the time. So Rome did fall. And toward the end, when they knew that they were doing the wrong thing and their Senate had become impossibly political and corrupt, they would literally kill Christians in the Colosseum to keep the minds of the plebes off the fact that they didn't have any money, and that the Roman government had completely run Rome into the ground. So I think we can see a lot of parallels here where we have our own United States government that's flying everything into the ground. But yet, my goodness, we've got all kinds. We've got let's see, UFOs. We have war with whoever that we pick in a day. And these are all things to keep your mind off the fact that our government is corrupt and running and has run the plane into the ground.
Let me put one more thing in perspective. Since we're in football season here, I can go talk to any of my kids' dads, which I see them at all our events and our sports and our stuff. They can tell you every single statistic about their favorite college team, about their favorite NFL team, whatever it is, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, whatever. They know by heart all these. They don't even know that their own kid is at a 50-50 reading level or a 50-50 math level. And that's, but that is just the programming or conditioning by society. I mean, ultimately, because school, in my opinion, you go to school for academics, period. You do not go to school for anything else except academics. And that should be the only thing in there. And to speak about that, like it was funny when you were talking to Alex and you mentioned, the investment in education. That word is such it's a word to sell people because there is no investment. I'm in finance. When you look at investment means you put out this amount of money because of this type of return. As far as we can see, it's only taking more and more money to get even worse results. These schools are not getting better. The performance is not getting better. The academics are not getting better. The rationalization, the critical thinking, the entrepreneurism, we're losing jobs to China and India and the higher level jobs all across. I mean, it is just a complete 180. And to call it an investment is literally lying.
Well, I was going to see, I did have a screenshot that I had taken showing, the amount of money that we were spending on education versus the results. And it was really a pretty good one. But unfortunately, it's not coming up in my slides.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we probably need
bread and circus.
Yeah. We probably need to get off of here. But Michael, thank you for being on with me. And it's a sad thing, but Julie has resigned from our board, so she will not be doing our podcast anymore, which is we're going to miss her very much, but certainly hope that she's going to and expect that she's going to be having lots of great things come up and lots of doors open that she will be walking through. So we're sorry to see you go, Julia. But we certainly wish you luck in everything that you do. And Michael, thank you for tuning in with me today. And thank you again for plugging our Patreon account. And I'm going to close out our video today with our video that I did to help you know how to be able to donate to us. And don't forget, we do have a word, our word processing bill is coming up for $300. So if you'd like to donate just even for that, I'd appreciate it. And I forgot to say this. Welcome to Telegram, you Telegram viewers. So today was our first day that we actually broadcasted live on Telegram. If you'd prefer not to watch us on Facebook or Twitter or one of the other accounts, and you like your Telegram account, please find us. We're Rope 2.0 on Telegram, and you can see us now live on Telegram as well. So thank you for tuning in. And Michael, God bless you, and thank you for joining me. And we will see you again, hopefully on Friday, when we have Teresa Mall, who is going to come and talk to us about her book, How to Woke Proof Your Life. And it's quickly becoming a national bestseller. So we're super happy to have her on. So have a great Wednesday today, and we will see you again on Friday morning at 9 a.m. So thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.